So, you know, every journey through hurdles and milestones and life events, there's always a certain amount of suffering with it. And with that suffering, what will you do with it? Will you survive the suffering, regardless of where it comes from, or will you pass away from the suffering? And so, the whole J world is not only a physiological philosophy, it is an intellectual philosophy. It is a philosophy about life, on life, and it is challenging the status quo. It is challenging everything out there. I mean, being raised Ashkenazi Jewish, being raised Jewish, when you think about it, it is Ashkenazi Jewish that I was raised. We understood the power of suffering. I didn't understand it at the time, but now that I am 49 years old, almost 50, now I understand the power of suffering. And that's why they don't allow people to study Kabbalism or the Kabbalah until you are well into your 40s and 50s, because you need to have the life experience to understand the points of Jewish mysticism, Christian Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Egyptology, the Greek and Roman gods and philosophies, Socrates, Aristotle. I can even challenge Socrates. I mean, shit, who challenges Socrates? He's supposed to be the greatest thinker of all time, and people worship Socrates. But, the unexamined life is worth living if you're willing to examine it. But I guess if you take that literally, the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, people don't like unpredictability. So I guess on that note, maybe it's kind of correct, but doesn't mean you have to live by that. Doesn't mean that that's cemented in stone. And so anything that you don't want to examine is not worth living. Well, maybe if you examined it and not put your literal intentional blinders on, maybe you might see that there is the unexamined life that becomes examined worth living. So I can challenge Socrates on some level. That's the thing about this world today, is that we have now room to challenge the status quo. We have room to challenge our ancestors. We have room to challenge old philosophies, old ways. People don't like that. Hey, John, brother John. we have room to challenge the old ways. We have room to challenge the dead. We have room to challenge everything. People don't like challenging stuff because they're so used to a certain way. Well, that's why we are in the predicament we're in, because people don't want to change. They don't want to suffer. But that's the thing. Suffering has been used as a weapon. Suffering has been manipulated for somebody else's cause, for somebody else's intentions and purpose. And so it's embedded. The suffering for somebody else is embedded in politics, in religions, and in scientific dogmas. I even read from somebody's meme, I guess it was a Christian meme, that says that I am weak. I am weak. That's why I have a savior, because I am weak. I mean, and I didn't post that and challenge it on my Facebook, because I have a lot of Christians on my Facebook. Maybe somebody took that quote and did something to it. So I don't want to say that was the original quote, but that's kind of the premise out there, is that people say, well, I'm weak, I need a savior to save me, and I will end up dead someday. It's written in the religions out there that you suffer for somebody else and then you pass away. But see, then I found, and even I found, in the J world, because even though the Ashkenazi Jews believe in suffering, even though the Ashkenazi Jews believe in suffering, they're still ending up dying, becoming a human sacrifice at some point. What I found in the J world is that you suffer for yourself. You break through so many different revelations and awarenesses, and just, you break through those roadblocks. You have an awareness not only for yourself, for the world, and then you can give your best to your children. You can give your best to your grandchildren. You can give your best to your husband, your wife, your friends, your family. If I hadn't have gone through all that suffering that I did, I couldn't have given my best to my husband. He would be watching me deteriorate. if I hadn't broken through and opened up my system and suffered through all the fucking crazy shit that I suffered through, my own predisposed issues. Because yeah, I held a lot of suffering in, from trauma from the past that was held inside, predisposed issues, stuff in my genetic line, all the different Hydra or viruses that are floating around out there that are great, but if you don't release those demons, they become the things that torture you and cause all the different maladies out there that people are trying to run away from and anesthetize themselves from. So if I hadn't gone through all that bullshit, I couldn't give the best to my husband. If I hadn't gone through the pain of dealing with my dog, I couldn't understand. I wouldn't be able to understand all the why surgeries are so detrimental, because that's a lot to come back from, if even at all possible, if you are so adverse to pain. When you actually see the fakeness of the antibiotics used after surgeries, when it wears away finally, when those spells wear off, now you're left where you were before, just like the clock striking midnight with Cinderella. Yeah, you can have your little dream of, the Prince Charming and the ball and all the different riches and social capital and all that. But at some point when the clock strikes midnight, everything will be as it was before. And now what do? Go find another spell to cast on yourself? Eventually your body won't be able to handle it. And so now you see how suffering has been used and commodified to make somebody else richer. Just look at the Olympics, all that suffering with the Olympics. And then you see the victims later on down the road when somebody oversteps their boundaries. Like Larry Nassar and the gymnastics. There's a lot of suffering in the Olympics and a lot of crimes being committed in the Olympics. And then also the sports industry, suffering for somebody else. Yeah, you douse them with a bunch of money, but they don't know how to handle money, and they're so young. They're buying stupid shit, right? Never really understanding how to utilize these resources because they're given so much of it. And then their resources, their personal resources, are being extracted for the enjoyment of somebody else. And then they deplete in the system. Oh, but wait, they had a great life, right? They had caviar and Maseratis and a big 10,000 square foot house that now is being sold right now through Sotheby's or some other, place. See, all that stuff is so temporary. That's the world that we're leaving now, is the temporary world. Now you have to understand suffering for what it really means, that the ancients knew and figured out how to hide and figured out how to manipulate to, yes, build a Babylonian society, which is great, but then a Babylonian society will also do itself in if it doesn't understand balance. And so, being raised in an Ashkenazi household, Jewish household, gave me a lot of awareness. I studied Buddhism a little bit, not so much. But I see all the suffering out there. I see the lifestyles where you're giving everything to the world and you think that you're a good person because you were giving so much of yourself to your kids, to your friends, your family, your job, that you're willing to sacrifice your body, mind, and spirit. So you work hard and you play hard and you leave nothing for yourself. And then are you really giving your best to your friends, your family, your job? I guess if the job just needs a body and someone to do the basic stuff, okay, fine. And in the meantime, you become a zombie because everything is being extracted from you, from your friends, your family, and your job. And so, that's why I've stayed home for the last 2 years. Last 2 years, I stayed home because I knew that this whole environment was going to trigger so much suffering in me that I knew I had to sit at home and just fucking suffer. I would rather suffer and prepare for the worst, which I'm saying to you guys, suffering is also being married to someone, knowing you're going to have to watch them go through that depletion process because you can't guarantee that they're going to save themselves. So you have to basically expect that they're going to pass away unless they're willing to save themselves. And you'll see them when they save themselves because they will extract themselves out of the current mainstream ways of doing stuff and they will sit home and fucking suffer. How many people will actually do that? That's the thing. You've watched me go through the suffering. And some of you have suffered with me. Some of you don't like the fact that I've suffered and you hate me for it. Not all of you, but my trolls don't like me that I advocate suffering. Well, I'm sorry, it's saving my fucking life. Obviously, it's not saving your life because you don't advocate suffering. You advocate taking away suffering. And so, the suffering in my world has given me so much mental clarity. So that way I can give my best to not only myself and my husband, And he'll figure it out for himself or not. But I give my best to the world, and I can protect myself from the inevitable. Because I'll tell you, when you're not prepared for the inordinate amount of suffering, when you're getting blindsided by someone dying, by a change in your world, when life takes a left turn, people suffer and they don't come back from that. When a child dies, when an animal dies, when a parent dies, when a husband or a wife dies, that's the ultimate suffering, especially when you really, really were so connected to them. People get divorced all the time because they can't handle the deterioration process. And so they've already protected themselves from that ultimate suffering. But imagine when you really respect that person and you found a way to take care of yourself, so that way you didn't destroy yourself in the process, somebody else going through a process, and they're relatively balanced. You now have to prepare yourself for that deterioration process. So I'm like 49 years old. This is the time the Gen Xers, and even baby boomers, but they're already going through their suffering of deterioration. But we're now embarking on that journey of watching the deterioration process happen or accelerate, especially during climate change. And so, of course, me being in the insurance industry, I'm preparing myself for all the crazy ass suffering. My dog prepared me for that, because that was an ultimate suffering. Even though it didn't seem like it on Facebook, but I had my own moments of like, damn, fuck. Okay, but that was a private moment for myself. What I put out there on Facebook is after I've dealt with it, after I dealt with my own personal suffering, now you're seeing me out there able to deal with the world after that personal suffering of losing an animal that I really, really, absolutely was connected to and wanted to save and was willing to withstand everyone going like, oh my God, you're so horrible for not putting her down or giving her medicine or all that shit. That was my own suffering, but I brought that on myself for a reason, and I can face that and be accountable for that, and also realize that prepares me for the future. Because I'll tell you, when you finally suffer to where it's now a benefit to you, and you stay alive and survive all your different diseases and cancers and all these things, you will see so much suffering around you, so much death and disease around you. You have to be able to prepare yourself for that. You have to mentally prepare yourself for that. People in their 60s and 70s already kind of come to terms with that for themselves, because they're already deteriorating and they have people around them deteriorating. But when you're in your 30s and 40s, you're not really prepared for that. I mean, you are, but you aren't. I mean, you're watching your parents deteriorate, so you're expecting at some point they're going to pass away. But you're not really prepared for actually dealing with that loss. And so being blindsided by that, you don't want to be blindsided. You want to go through the suffering. You know that you can survive it through your own suffering. So that way, when the actual suffering out there that you can't control out there happens, it's not going to destroy you. That's the conditioning process. But people are not conditioned for that. They're conditioned to take away their suffering, drug it out, anesthetize themselves, use alcohol, drugs, and all that stuff, so they never actually feel it. So when the actual major suffering happens, they can't come back from it. That's what the broken heart syndrome is. When a spouse dies because the wife or the husband also is deteriorating, when their spouse dies, they don't last very long. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the conditioning to handle that kind of suffering. So they end up right alongside their wife. They join them in the rainbow or the heaven or whatever. But in the J world, if you really understand in the J world, you have to withstand that kind of suffering. You must be able to be strong enough. You have to condition yourself for it. You have to expect it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen if that person saves themselves, but you can't guarantee that they're going to save themselves. So you have to prepare for yourself how to handle the inordinate amount of suffering that's going to be happening around you. Because right now, yeah, again, some people have been shielded from that because they're still in their 30s and 40s. People progressively died around them, but their own spouse, their own partner is still young enough in their world that they think that they're going to have so many years. But then when shit goes crazy in the atmosphere, there is no guarantee. Stuff can happen just like that if you haven't opened up your system. So that's why the whole J world is about opening up your system. So that way, when you do deal with the suffering, your arteries and capillaries do open up, your lymph nodes do open up, and they release. And so then you're not stuck with dying from a preventable condition like a heart attack or a stroke or a blood clot. You understand the power of salt and ions and feeling the pain of release. You understand maybe you need to sequester yourself for a certain amount of time so you can recalibrate. Because working hard and playing hard leaves no room for taking care of yourself when you're always taking care of somebody else's entertainment, being there for them all the time. When you're not there for yourself, you cannot give your best to other people. And so, yeah, so we see how the world has used suffering as a way to commodify, use people's bodies as a way to commodify and line the coffers of somebody else. In politics, in all religions and scientific dogmas. And so, the suffering for somebody else, where John says a built-in obsolescence, it's written in the scriptures. It's written in the Bible. People are attracted to suffering because they understand the power of it, but they don't understand how to deal with it. And so, Buddhist monks, I said, again, understand the power of suffering, and of course they get some sort of enlightenment, like the Dalai Lamas who keep dying and reproducing. But you don't have to die from it. You don't have to turn into a mummy and starve yourself and do the fasting that is all over the medical holistic system. You know, when I posted that picture of that guy, that doctor, the ND doctor, that says, oh yeah, do a fruit cleanse. What is it? Fruit cleanse equals removes disease from the body. Why would you remove disease? You need the disease, you need the proteins to trigger your prostaglandins to push out the demons, and then you need to eat food, right? You need to eat food to then repair the damage and rebuild your heart, rebuild your lungs, rebuild your stomach, your digestive, rebuild everything. But see, what he's advocating is that you basically starve yourself. So you do a fruit cleanse, right? Shut off your indicators. How he characterizes disease is not feeling comfortable. So what do you do when you don't feel comfortable? You starve the body of food. You cause, autophagy, but there is no rebuilding. And so that's why he's aging. That's why doctors who do all these fruit cleanses are like, oh yeah, it's great to feel nothing. Okay, as you are dying in the system and you are aging aggressively, but yeah, you could still be like viable, and we've accepted the aging process. So when some doctor says, hey, yeah, do a fruit cleanse, and now you have all these people who are like, oh, I'm gonna do a fruit cleanse and eat raw and do organic, and you see them deteriorating, and this environment is so aggressive, they don't have enough substance to convert the energy to keep them alive. And so they're like, oh yeah, it's okay, I'll go off into into Pleiades or some other fucking dimension, and they justify death and all that, and there's the absolution, politics, religion, science, and spirituality, and not feeling anything, and also blaming somebody and being an activist. And so I'm following some of the main activists out there, and that's what they're advocating. But that is the 1960s, 1970s cult evolution, revolution. That's the Pied Piper leading everyone into oblivion. But you can't say anything because that's so built in. Like John said, again, built-in obsolescence, abso-fucking-lutely. So I don't say anything on those pages. I just observe, just like people observe me and they say their shit over here, which is fine. That's how you do it. You take what somebody says, you spin it to your version, which is great. Then someone who observes both sides can then make their choice. And they get all the information. That's why I don't want people to challenge me, because I'm going to tell you, they challenge me over there in another group, in another fucking page. That's great. If you want to see both sides of it, you look at my stuff and you look at their stuff, and then you figure out where you want to end up. And it's your choice. I'm just representing, my world. But yeah, I don't challenge anyone on their pages. I've learned not to do that because I don't want people doing that to me. So if I don't want people doing that to me, then I don't do it to other people. And then everyone is allowing to live and let live and all that shit, and their representation, and they're giving people choices. Because as soon as you look at my stuff and this other people's stuff, and then you figure out where you are, you'll make a choice, and you can't blame anyone for your choices. And so fear porn, horror movies, politics, religion, science, activism, war, the Christians and the lions, all the human sacrifice in the Aztec days, all the torture stuff, all the hangings from the 1800s, 1700s, the witch hunts, all of that is a suffering that people are attracted to. All the court cases, watching the Murdoch case is a suffering that people are attracted to. See, people understand the power of suffering. The system understands the power of suffering. How you respond to it will determine, obviously, two different sides, longevity, shortevity, whatever. But people understand the power of suffering. And they use it. Just like all over YouTube. That's all the crime shows, all the murder stories. Oh yeah, I'll tell you. I was so attracted to the murder stories for many years, the crime stories for many years. I don't really watch them that much anymore. I don't have really now an attraction to that kind of suffering of the story about how someone was destroyed by a coworker or by a lover or by some other person that was obsessed with them. Okay? I mean, I don't have that attraction to that. I don't need to go and try to convert someone and try to end their suffering. What I now watch is a lot of historical stuff, like Bobby Kennedy. Not so much of his demise, but of what he brought to the world at the time of his life. Jimmy Hoffa. History is so amazing. That is something that represents your future. Is history. If you don't understand history, you'll keep repeating it. And we are. But we're not. Because remember, we're in a new world order now. And the new world order is getting rid of all those that are promoting the suffering at somebody else's expense. And so if you don't want to suffer yourself personally through your own predisposed issues, and you're always trying to suffer to look cute or suffer to buy your way into social capital so you can look a certain way and be a certain way. No, the New World Order is getting rid of that, because people who do suffer for other people but not for themselves, they don't end up living indefinitely. They end up fucking dying. They end up being the human sacrifice. And people follow them over the cliff. And so that's why I say the fear porn and the horror movies and the exercise, okay, let's say the exercise, all the tattoos, you know, that's the suffering that people enjoy because they're so dead inside. They have to do things like that, like exercise and marathons and working out. And then the extreme suffering is when people start cutting themselves, the self-harm. And so when you're that dead inside and you're doing that, that is then the most excessive type of self-harm suffering. If people would just release the demons, and that's in my book on how to release the demons. If people don't like that because they don't want to touch their ass, okay, fine. If people actually release the demons, they wouldn't resort to dying for somebody else. They wouldn't resort to sacrificing themselves for the community. That when you do save yourself, you actually do fucking save humanity. What do you mean by save yourself? When you suffer through your own predisposed issues of then, you know, dealing with your genetic line's idiosyncrasies and pathogenic cultures that you're holding inside because of all the remedies and surgeries and starvation, when you finally deal with that and release those demons, bring in the actual all food and repair and regenerate, you will bring the best to the world out there. And then you will not advocate half the shit that's being advocated out there. But if you don't do that, then you will fall into suffering for other people, torturing yourself, and call it living, calling it working hard and playing hard, and then that goes into all the politics, religion, and science. So yeah, you know, the J world is understanding your own personal suffering, and you're not trying to convert someone else to do that. You're showing the power of your personal suffering through your predisposed issues, pulling out those demons when need be, because, you know, people are like, well, why would you stick your finger in your butt? Why don't you just use an enema and do that? Because that's not really enough. Enemas are just something temporary. Enemas are just like, no. You have to understand that you have to understand your body. You have to understand literally your body. You have to understand how to utilize your own muscles, your breathing, and your digits without relying on contraptions. And then you have to realize that you have to use all food in the food supply. And then you'll realize that when you are in so much pain and you understand how to cough, sneeze, and blow your nose and hawk loogies and not put off an image like you're so clean in your suffering. No, somebody's suffering can be fucking dirty. Yeah, pooping. People don't like to talk about pooping. I watched a Facebook reel last night. I think my husband showed it to me. I'm like, oh my God. This girl was messing with her boyfriend, and he was sleeping and his butt was out, and she was like sticking something near his butt, and he was like, oh my God. And you can see him clench his ass so tight, as if he was triggered and trauma in someone touching his ass. It was a very aggressive reaction that person will never ever figure out how to pull out his own demons, ever. Because just even when he's sleeping, someone touching his ass made him react that crazy. We have sexualized body parts that we have to understand how to survive. We have traumatized people with lifestyles and sexual orientations, so that way they never understand the power of their own alimentary canal. And there's a whole agenda around controlling your biochemistry through your fear of your own body parts, through how you characterize your body parts, how we have sexualized every single orifice in our body, so then you feel shame around understanding your body parts. And so then you're always doing things for the surface, but you don't understand internally what's going on, because you then give yourself to the medical and the holistic system to then penetrate you in so many different ways. And that was intentional through Rockefeller medicine and through the holistic market. And when someone is manipulating you and you working out and doing all that fake muscle building, when you don't really come by it honestly through hard work and then learn how to rest and recalibrate, so that way you can keep being self-sufficient and build your own fucking world. Not, again, sacrifice yourself for somebody else. And so attraction to suffering, sports, exercise, human sacrifice, death, dying, medical issues, gladiators, murder, crime stories, victim, predator identification. Oh, that's huge. That's the suffering people love to identify with. Blaming the Olympics, testing, because tests are also a suffering. Like taking SATs and different entrance exams and all that stuff. Relationships, watching train wrecks, rubbernecking accidents, getting tattoos. Oh, people who get tattoos have such a crazy issue inside that getting a tattoo, the pain is what gives them the feeling like they're alive, right? I got a tattoo with my husband a long time ago when we got married, and I couldn't handle that kind of pain. I'm like, why do people do this? How do people just sit and have someone just poke needles in them for hours? I couldn't understand the joy of this, but let me tell you, when you have so much trauma inside and you feel so dead inside, the tattoos feel freaking good. I don't get that because I don't have that kind of biochemistry. Botox, plastic surgery, injectable V's. I mean, that's all people are attracted to. That's how the suffering of harming people has been used for somebody else. People do self-harm like cutting because they feel so dead inside. They want to feel something. I knew a girl a long time ago, back when I was in junior high, that she was cutting herself. I was like, telling my mom, oh my God, this girl was cutting herself. And she reported that to, because she's a self-reporter, because what are those where we have to report things when people cut themselves and all that stuff, or harm themselves? Well, she had to report that. And so somebody, I guess the girl figured out that it may be my parents, one that called it in, and they probably didn't like me for it. But I was just like, why would someone cut themselves? I couldn't figure it out. But it was happened back in the 80s. Okay, girls were cutting themselves because of so much trauma, and they feel dead inside. Who knows what kind of, lifestyle was going on in that household? That's the thing that people don't realize. Because, they understand the power of cutting or power of suffering, but they do harm themselves. Okay, so that's how much suffering is going on. People don't even feel anything, and they're suffering from not feeling things. See, that's such an oxymoron. An oxymoron is when you're suffering because you don't feel something. You want to feel something so bad, but you can't for whatever reason. It's probably because all the painkillers in the genetic line, all the anesthetizing and the drugs and all that stuff has stopped people from feeling stuff. And so if they're so desperate to feel something, they do harm themselves, as well as other people, because they have to bring on that suffering, that pain. And then they derive benefit from it. That's the whole bully, victim, predator type of situation, when you're feeling so dead inside that you have to go and inflict pain on somebody else in order to get that type of return. And that's what the New World Order is trying to now eradicate. They've developed this. They developed that. They're the ones that brought that shit in. They taught you all to do that, okay? Now they're like, oh shit, now we have to go and recalibrate. That's why we have the climate change. But hey, remember, we have 10 different truths to it. That's where I'm coming from, because I understand, I see it on a very global scale. But you have the choice to believe that or believe that we're in some kind of universal freaking pattern. Okay, fine. Okay. And so they intentionally make themselves suffer by self-harm by cutting themselves, when they really should be releasing the demons, not developing new ones. So when you're cutting yourself or doing things, working out and taking all your different drugs and things like that, you're developing new different demons. When you're getting surgeries, you're developing new demons. When you don't release your demons, those demons are fornicating, developing offspring demons. And so then you can't get ahead of it, and that's why cancer happens. That's why disease happens. That's why the aging process happens. When those little kids inside of you, the offspring from all the demons inside of you that you haven't released, they are eating at the parent. You are the parent. That's why you're aging. That's why you're losing your hair or graying or all that stuff. You have so many little offspring of little demons that you've never released that are cannibalizing the crap out of you. And that's the aging process. Marriage. See? I got caught up in the marriage thing, but yes, that was necessary for so many reasons. I came into a world where it was all about suffering for somebody else, being cured, and producing. California, all about producing. New York, all about producing. So marriage, when watching your loved one deteriorate and change, is worth the pain and suffering of losing them to whatever. Sometimes you don't realize how much pain and suffering is involved until you experience it. And some people are not prepared for it. It blindsides the fuck out of them. My dog had blindsided the fuck out of me how much she was tearing. I really wanted to save her, but I couldn't because of the surgery she had in the past prior to me. And I blow my nose on camera so you see the necessity of blowing your nose so you can build up pressure and release things as needed. Because the more you blow your nose, the more you push all the waste out. And it could be the mucus coming out of your nose. It could be lymphocytes that are coming through your lymph nodes. It could be your poop getting pushed through the bowels. But when people don't blow their nose or they don't sneeze and cough, then all that shit stays in their body and metastasizes. People don't realize that you can understand the leverage of how to pressurize your system to release the demons. But you also have digits to figure out how to help and manipulate your own alimentary canal so you can help release those demons so they don't metastasize and start eating away at you and developing more demons. And so you must be strong. Are you strong enough? Are you ready for the ultimate pain and suffering? Which is why people don't get married sometimes, because they don't want to go through that process. Which I completely understand. Or they don't want to go deal with somebody else's bullshit, which I completely understand too. Some people have a lot of demons that they're not prepared for, or they see the demons and they're like, they see out there how many demons are running people, and they're like, I'm not really wanting to take on somebody else's demons. With my husband, he understood my demons way back then. I've watched him go through the growth process of our evolution in our marriage, and so I'm more than happy to deal with his demons and whatever it is, because his demons are not as bad. He actually has a good head in his shoulders. You know, he's a dude and he has his own mind. He doesn't like listen to me all the time, but he has a good enough head on his shoulders that I can deal with his demons and he can deal with mine. I don't really force my demons on him. You know, I don't make him go through the suffering. I mean, he watched me with my dog, but that was the suffering that he had to deal with. But I was the one that I was there every single day while he was on the truck, shielded from that. So I had to face that suffering, and I didn't allow it to really impact him. I was the one, even on the weekends, to take my dog up and down outside, do whatever, feed her, bottle feed her, all that stuff. Okay, so I try to minimize my suffering from him. That's why I deal with my own sickness. I don't make him take care of me. I mean, if I was paralyzed, if I actually triggered that, well, he'd be forced to. Luckily, I don't have that in my genetic line of paralysis. So he didn't have to go and figure out how to take care of me. Because if he had to take care of me, if I was paralyzed, he would lose money and lose his, yeah. I don't want to ever go down that road. You know, I'd rather know that I'm well enough and I can withstand everything. And then if something happens to him, who knows, I'm strong enough to pick up where he's left off. That's how I feel. Like the time that I'm taken to rebuild myself to handle the climate change, I will be able to handle whatever he needs to go through, and I will be there 100% for him because I'm strong enough, I'm capable enough, and I can do it. He'll have to kind of cut down his lifestyle, but if you're paralyzed or if you have other issues going where you can't really work as much, if at all, well, you're not gonna be able to do boating, you're not gonna be able to do this and that and whatever, and so you just by that situation, the lifestyle will come down, and then we'll figure out how to build up again. And so that's what I'm representing, that somebody in the family is taking care of themselves, so that way when somebody chooses not to do that, or when they choose to do it and they have to be laid up in bed for however much, you have then the ability to pick up where they left off. That right there is the marriage. So either you pick up where they left off and help them rebuild, or help them out the door. I help my dog out the door, will I help my husband out the door, or will I help him rebuild? Well, that will be up to him, but I will be there for him in that manner. That's what my marriage is about. And so I'm willing to suffer through that, because that's the world that I came into. That's the world that I've committed myself to. Okay? I want him to enjoy whatever he wants to enjoy, and I will too, but this is what's necessary. Okay? Suffering is not like, I'm not trying to suffer to be a martyr. I'm suffering for strategy to keep our world relatively balanced. Okay? And I'm not forcing my suffering on him. If he wants to go do whatever he does, I don't stop him from doing whatever. He does whatever the hell he wants, within the confines of our marriage contract. But I don't purposely spend so much money, make him suffer to make more. No, I have a very minimal lifestyle. I don't do too much. I actually am up in here more than I'm out there. I'm using my brain more than I'm out there, which is why you're seeing all these different awarenesses. Because it really is, for me now, it's traveling through the brain versus being distracted by the physical baubles and the physical things of life. Okay? I can still go and hike if I need to. Like, I can't wait. Eventually, him and I will go to some places and go hike somewhere, and spend a day outdoors. We'll do that. But that's with me and him. Okay? So, I'm fine with that. So when I'm not doing that, then I'm up here strategizing my own life and the world, and understanding the world that I live in. So that way I can prepare myself for the changes that will inevitably come about at some point. And so, can you survive a spouse dying? You don't even want it to depend. You don't really want to depend upon friends and family, because they have their own lives to figure out. I don't depend upon other people to get me through situations. My husband is the only one that I was dependent upon, as far as, because we're married, and so that's just already built in. But I don't go. I reached out to one person when my dog was dying, and that was it. And she can handle it, and I appreciate that. But that was my first time dealing with death. That was my first time. Now people will be there if something happens in the world and shit happens. Okay, but I don't expect people to be there. For them, they want to be there for themselves, but I don't want people to be there for me like that, because it's not really their job to do that. It's my job to deal with whatever process I need to go through for whatever event happens. And so when you look at your life, if you are single because of an event where it takes away your spouse or your significant other, can you handle being on your own without going under somebody else or finding another relationship to go fill in where they left off? That's the thing, is that I don't want to go in and replace someone or an animal because I couldn't do it myself. Now I figure, okay, how can I be on my own, understand the resources out there, how to utilize them, and plan for that, and then know how to take care of things that my husband used to take care of, right? So, these are the things that I think about. I don't take his ass for granted, okay? I know what he's capable of, and I know what I have to learn how to be capable of, and not just be like, okay, well, that's his job. No, I got to learn how to do the stuff that he's doing, because eventually it could be where I have to take care of it. So those are the things that I think about. Okay, so that's the thing. But in the old world, right, people both passed away together. So yeah, the woman that did all the bills and took care of the house and the the laundry and all that stuff, and you had the guy do the mowing and fix stuff and figure out with the contractors and did the plumbing and helped with the electrical and all that. Now, and so then they died together. So then, okay, but now some people will have to be on their own and learn how to do the stuff that their spouse did. And and sometimes some things are really expensive, but there are other things that you can just learn just because of what they know, and learn that. And then, so that's the thing, is right now I'm in a process of learning everything that I can to be relatively self-sufficient in the new world. Like, this is a period of learning. This is the time. It's not time for me to go party and be distracted and play with everybody else. This is a time for me to figure out my fucking survival for the future. And it's learning everything. And then realize what you are capable of, and then what you need to go and contract out, and what you are capable of. And if you're and it's just constant strategizing. Because you will never know when that fateful day happens. It could be tomorrow. It could be next week. You could even pass away. So then, whatever. But then you should have then gone and lived your life and go party and everything, because you don't know if you're going to even... No. This is my life. It's preparation. It's enjoying the now, and it's preparing for the future. And you can do both. I don't necessarily have to go and be like, oh, I got to go party because I may not party tomorrow, so I'm going to party today and live like there's no tomorrow. I mean, that's not my ideology. Because then yeah, what's there to talk about when you're in that lifestyle? That's about other people, or you have to be under the influence and just talk about whatever. I don't know. Anyways, so I'm going on that tangent. So can you survive your spouse dying? You don't even want to depend upon friends and family because they have their own lives to figure out. Imagine how hard it was losing an animal, and you don't replace an animal with another animal. Imagine losing the love of your life. That's the thing. When you can imagine, think of the worst thing that could happen. Not to you, but to things that you rely on that have given you security and dependability and whatever. And you imagine losing that. That's a suffering. If you can even imagine, even face losing that. There was no likes on that post. When I posted that was painful. Let me tell you, if people liked it, that's hard to freaking like. I get it. If you like it, great. But I'm saying there was no likes on that post when I posted about the attraction to suffering, sports, and then imagine your spouse dying. Imagine your child dying. Can you imagine the worst? Will you survive the ultimate suffering? So I find it fascinating when I can face, even virtually or even, just theoretically, what it means to lose someone you absolutely depend upon on some level, you absolutely love and respect. And people don't want to think about that. But dude, that's why people get blindsided and they get traumatized and they don't survive the suffering. But that was built in to our society. That's why there's so many distractions, drugs and alcohol and exercise and adrenaline and oxytocin and animals and people and friends and family and associations and occupations. They're finding every way to shield you from from that reality. So when that reality happens, you ain't prepared for it and you don't survive it. That was the intention. And so you see people, they suffer just even thinking about it. So they don't want to even think about it. They don't want to read it. They don't want to like it because it hits too close to home. I understand it. Suffering is when you get married and you lose someone. Suffering is when you're single, watching everyone hang out together. Suffering is when you fall into social mores and don't develop your own path. Suffering when it's hard to stand on your own 2 feet. Suffering is when you must learn the hard way. Okay? Eventually you learn from that suffering. You don't learn to depend on other people. You admired and you found a way to utilize your talents without compromising them. This is where then this is how you respect your community. You learn how to utilize the resources properly in your environment without compromising somebody else. If you're by yourself and nobody except for the resources you must pay for, you'll learn very quickly how to do the little things on your own and save up for the big things. And that's the thing with women who haven't had an experience in construction and plumbing and electricity and all that stuff. And there's men out there, so many of them who are well versed in each one of those. And if you're so dependent on having somebody just do it for you, people will put themselves in relationships in order to get those things done. But That's how you walk into things that you're not prepared for. And so you don't want to be in a relationship because out of need, because you need someone to fill in where you haven't figured out how to fill in for yourself or earn for yourself. And so then this is the time now, women and men, to learn the things that you depend upon someone else to do and or work for, and also save yourself, because it's hard to do all these things, but that's why things should be done incremental so you don't overwhelm your body, your mind, and your spirit, and your brain. Everything is a process. Because I don't want to be like, damsel in distress, please save me, right? I got to make sure that my house is fucking reinforced before, and even then it's hard to prepare for everything. So you just have to figure out, how to utilize your insurance, how to utilize your environment without compromising somebody else, without taking advantage of somebody else. That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to take advantage of anyone. I don't. I got to earn everything. And so that means I must learn certain things and be prepared for certain things and figure out what the hell do I do if something like this happens? If my husband wasn't here, what would he do? What would I do? That's the thing that the J world must understand, because if their partner, again, doesn't survive and they happen to outlive their partner, can you survive without them? Without going under somebody else? That's the ultimate when you can rely on yourself. Okay. If you're by yourself, nobody else, okay, I got that. Okay, so that's how you survive when you've been through suffering. You must be strong enough physically and mentally able to stand on your own 2 feet. So that's why when people are aging out together, they have to die together, because when one person dies, they won't have what it fucking takes to be on their own. And if you are by yourself already and you're aging out, you depend on your friends and family and your associations. You built in that network of people to take care of you as you are deteriorating. And then you're all deteriorating together, depending on each other. See, the world is a freaking amazing place. Learn how to use the suffering to your advantage. See, suffering doesn't have to be destructive and something you die from. Suffering is an excellent learning experience. Excellent. When my husband was home for those 2 days when he was sick, we watched Outer Banks. We binge watched Outer Banks together, and it was kind of fun to hang out together. Okay? But he was able to sit and just deal with his pain and whatever. He ate food, like he did. He had a diarrhea and released the demons. Good. He replenished those fluids, those resources, because we had salty food and we had sweet food. And so sometimes taking care of yourself is actually really enjoyable. Being by yourself, because if I wasn't there and he understood my stuff, sort of, he can just sit and watch a Netflix series and just be distracted for a minute. But he's staying home. He's not trying to push beyond his capability because he had to rest. People have to fucking rest, but they don't. They just keep going and going like they're a fucking Energizer bunny, and then they pass away prematurely. It's okay to just sit and learn about the world. And if Netflix can keep your ass on the fucking couch so you can recalibrate, then do it. Utilize the resources in your environment. Netflix is only $21. It's not that expensive. So the J world allows those who understand the suffering to build themselves back up when they know they must go through the hard suffering in the future. And that's what is preparing me right now. My life right now is preparing me for the future. And I'm still enjoying my life. Right? I have my husband, I have my house, I have my little things I got to do today. I have all you guys. I can be by myself and be cool. And I also can talk and release my own demons without compromising somebody else. I don't go and try to convert somebody else or bully somebody else or do anything to make them think the way I do. I just put my shit on my Facebook for my own, and you guys will either take what you want and leave the rest, whatever, and then you will figure it out for yourself. But the whole world out there is a learning experience. It is something to challenge, something to understand. It's a journey to learn about other people's dimensions and worlds. It's a journey, and you can challenge them without challenging them. You can challenge people's lifestyles and belief systems without actually challenging them. Because it's not just them. There's probably 10 of them that are just like them. And so you're not disrespecting anyone. You're just challenging what the old world used to be without confronting someone. That's what I had to learn. That's why I used to stay on my Facebook. I don't convert anyone, and I'm on my Facebook trying to convert me and make comments and all that stuff. Sometimes I do cross boundaries, and then I feel remorseful. Like, why did I do that? Oh, because I really like them and I want them to. But then you can't do that. You can't fucking do that. But it's a process. So the J rule allows you, those who understand suffering, to build themselves back up when they know they must go through the hard suffering in the future. Because you know a lot of suffering will happen in the future for many people. You must prepare for it and be strong. And as you know, I'm talking about myself, right? Because the biggest fear I had like 20 years ago was that I would be homeless. That was the biggest fear, is I'd be homeless. Because I lived in California, and you see homeless all over in San Francisco, and they're suffering astronomically. But a lot of them have mental issues, physical issues. Well, I had to release those demons. And so now I don't have that fear of being homeless, because I've gotten a lot of my duckies in a row. And I strategized resources out there. And so nothing is forever. So you constantly have to evolve to the environment. And the government will find ways to help people go through that transition. Okay? They're not out to go and destroy all of humanity, but they know there are people's lifestyles and belief systems that are taking so much from the environment that they have to go and find a way to save the environment. Okay? All right? So the government isn't really all that bad. But people who are suffering, who don't know how to respond to it correctly, will have an issue with the government because they don't understand all sides of the issue. And so, as you know, I'm talking about myself, because when I do not go out there and enjoy the world, I also want to prepare for the worst. There is no uglier feeling like the feeling of being blindsided because I wasn't prepared for it. See, that's my insurance side of me. You have insurance for a reason, whether it's life insurance, health insurance, if that's what you need, car insurance, home insurance, business insurance. You just don't know things that happen that are so unpredictable, out of your control, and you want to have that backup. Okay? And so preparing to deal with massive amounts of pain is like an insurance, so that way you don't die from something blindsiding you that happened just out of nowhere, that you've already mentally and even financially and spiritually had prepared for that type of aggressive suffering. Because some people, when they do get blindsided by something happening, they go turn to drugs, alcohol, sex, or they don't survive. They do themselves in because they can't handle that kind of pain. They were never prepared for it. They were never conditioned for it. So it's like having insurance. It's better to have it and not need it versus need it and not have it. See, that's the whole thing with the insurance world that I learned. How much insurance? Well, that's then, the salesman. You need all this insurance? We're like, well, I don't have $1 million in assets. Why am I buying $1 million policy? Well, if you hit somebody and then, or whatever, then you could be, they could have millions and millions of dollars and they could be, so anyways. All right, they could garnish your wages. There's some of the sales techniques in the insurance world where you can get someone who doesn't have $1 million in assets actually buy $1 million policy because of future garnishments, because of a catastrophic accident. Okay, so how much insurance is really what you have to look at. All right, so I cannot enjoy life until I am prepared for the worst thing I will inevitably experience. So that's the thing why I've stayed home for the last 2 years, why I really don't go out, because I have to prepare for the worst things. So that way, when I know that there's a worst thing that I'm prepared for, mentally, physically, financially, whatever, then I can go out there and enjoy the world because I know that part is taken care of. See, people say like, oh, you're so negative. I can't be around you because you're so negative and this and that. No, I think of the worst things that could happen, the worst feelings that could be, the worst case scenario. So when I have that all figured out and tucked away, then I can go and be like, okay, now I'm going to go out there and hang out with people and hang out with the world and take whatever minimal risks that are out there and know that, okay, I now have earned the right to enjoy the things out there that people are just like taking for granted. And then when catastrophe happens, then they'll deal with it. But would they have actually the means financially, spiritually, intellectually to handle the catastrophes that could happen in this type of environment? No, they're not ready for that. And so they don't survive. So yeah, they have fun first and then shit happens and they don't survive it. Well, I'm doing the reverse. I'm suffering first and deal with all the pitfalls. And then when I go out there in the world, I'm prepared to deal with the catastrophes. Okay? So yeah, I cannot enjoy life until I'm prepared for the worst things I will inevitably experience. And I can't always plan for everything. Sometimes you don't think about what could happen until it happens. But you learn from that. When that shit happens, you learn from it. That's what I'm saying. Every single thing that happens that is like uncomfortable, you learn from it. And that's something you tuck away in the back of your mind. So that way, then you know how to mitigate that potential if it happens. That's what I'm saying. Like with climate change. When you see the construction over there in California and they're under 10 feet of snow, and now you look at the construction has to be different. The way you eat food has to be different in California now. You can't be all organic and working out all the time because can you handle the extreme weather that's going on over there? Yeah, no, the plastic surgery and the Botox are not going to serve Californians well when their environment is becoming now even more extreme. Not mild like it used to be, the Mediterranean climate. Now it's going to be like, holy shit, 10 feet of snow and extreme blistering heat. You think plastic surgery bodies that are working out all the time can handle that kind of aggressive particle acceleration? No. So you have to be able to adapt to those conditions. So you have to prepare for the worst and enjoy the best. Life, in my opinion, is preparing to be to deal with the worst and enjoy the best. And so remember, I'm an insurance agent. I'm not licensed now, but I used to be licensed in California and I used to be licensed in Ohio, but I'm not selling insurance today. But I'm giving you my take on the insurance world and how it influences my thought process and suffering and preparing. Okay? And so suffering also comes in the form of self-flagellation in some religions. And then in my opinion, this is self-harm. That's why religions that are really aggressive, they understand the power of suffering, but they use it to line their coffers, not really help you, but to line their coffers. So then the action of flogging oneself, especially in a form of religious discipline, and you see that in Middle Eastern cultures, also in like the Jesuits or the real extreme Catholic culture. You saw it in like Angels and Demons or the Da Vinci Code, that guy that was self-flogging himself. Oh, it's pretty roof. Okay, I couldn't do it. But that's how whatever. Okay, so change is suffering. All right, and that's the thing, is you have to understand that when things change, they suffer through it, but remember, you can come out from it and be better for it. Suffer for yourself, not for somebody else. So what if you can suffer for yourself? Give your best to yourself so you give the best to the world out there. And so that's what I told you before, what we talked about before. I don't want a bunch of fucking martyrs out there. I don't want someone to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be Mother Teresa and just give my life to everybody and then be like, yeah, okay, that's great. You get your accolades and your social capital and all that. But in the end, you don't win. You've just given all your resources to everyone around you who will then just waste it because they're going to do the same thing. And then that's how people take each other down. Because you're depleting yourself. And you're allowing people to just take resources from you. Just take and take and take. And that's it. You're not giving to yourself because you can't really rely on people giving stuff to you. You have to give yourself. If you don't give to yourself, then everyone's taken from you. You end up the crypt keeper. You end up dead. So that's why you save yourself to save humanity. So if you really want to save humanity, save yourself. Take yourself out of all those crazy things that are causing you to be a martyr, to be a saint. All right, so that's the whole J world. It's a compilation of Jewish, Ashkenazi, Buddhism, understanding the commodification of suffering through the medical system, through the holistic system, through all the different spiritual systems. It's now you see how the Rosicrucians have figured out how to build a really amazing society. But if you don't understand both sides of the argument, then you will think that you are being balanced when you're actually not. And then it's just, I don't know, You get caught up in all the baubles and the fear porn and all that stuff. And then you end up doing exactly what you were not intending to do. People want to, they don't want to die. They're afraid of all the pollution and all this and all that, but they end up dead. How is that? Because they allowed somebody else to control their emotions and to control their suffering. They didn't understand suffering for what it was. They didn't understand their own immune system, their own filtration processes. They didn't understand that there's techniques to release the demons, of which that's the J world now with my current book. And so when you're so afraid of all the wars and the pollution and the water and the air and all that stuff, because you're afraid you're going to die, but you end up dead, then somebody gave you that argument. Someone figured out how to manipulate your fear to serve their purpose. And so then what was it all for? You working out so you can prolong your life actually doesn't prolong your life. You dieting and going under the surgeries and the oncology and the herbal remedies and the cannabis is not prolonging your life. It's just making your suffering easier so that way you don't feel anything when you actually do die. So that's what I'm saying, is that you have to realize that, yeah, we have been massively manipulated by those who understand the power of suffering and commodified it. Now it's time to wake the fuck up, if you even have the ability to. You may not. All right, bye.